Hello, welcome to the Mediabox. I'm joined by Sean Dougherty, who is a senior advisor at the OECD Network on Fiscal Relations. Thank you so much, Sean, for joining me at the Mediabox today. Tell us about what fiscal management is and why is it important to have sound fiscal management?
It's a pleasure to be here at the Council of Europe and speaking with you. Fiscal management is really critical for all levels of government, but particularly for subnational governments and regional governments. And we were speaking this morning on this debate about how to strengthen fiscal management. And we see it as having multiple components, but I think most importantly is having a good degree of autonomy and control of the local government and the regional government, that they can actually have full functionality over their fiscal resources, their budgeting, and that they're responsible for their constituents, also through a democratic process. So there's a kind of feedback loop. And it's also not money coming from heaven, let's say, or from the central government only. It's also their own resources that they've gotten from their constituents, and they're responsible for those. At the same time, there's a lot of diversity and unevenness in the capacity of governments at different regions within many countries. And so often equalization systems can play an important role in leveling the playing field and ensuring that governments in different regions of the same country can have similar types of capacity and access to public services. So those are, I think, key components. One thing that's, I think, newer is to think about, well, we've always worried about efficiency and good quality of use of resources, and we've had traditional institutions that have monitored those and tried to improve their quality. But now we have some interesting new technologies, artificial intelligence, and one of the things that I was really excited about talking about today, and it came up quite a bit in the debate, is how we can deploy some of these technologies, not just to improve efficiency, but also to improve the responsiveness of government. And I think one of the delegates raised the question of continuous monitoring of governments, of budgets, of the use of those resources. That's a really exciting thing. We couldn't do that a few years ago, but it's now possible. And it's also possible to improve the efficiency and the utility of many of these resources and just let fiscal resources go further. We can deliver more resources with less. And that's, I think, particularly important in times, constrained times that we're facing right now around the world.
And which of the OECD countries are closest to sound fiscal management in your mind?
I mean, I don't know if I would really want to name names. You know, we pat a lot of them on the back. I mean, I think OECD countries in general are among the more advanced economies in the world. And we have quite a few members that are, I think, strong. But there's also a diversity. And, Germany is always a sort of positive case, and they've taken a lead. I mean, in some cases, they might have even been too prudent in recent years, but I think they've perhaps turned a corner given, I would say, some of the geopolitical risks and contexts. And I think that, they in particular, because they've been so prudent, they're actually in a position to take charge of some particularly difficult challenges in the current context. There's a lot of other countries that have faced, more difficulties in recent years, but I think things have been evolving. Still, debt levels are very elevated in quite a few countries, including where I work in France, and that's a real challenge. So they can pivot the use of resources, but they probably can't extract more resources from the population. So that's always a challenge. I work a lot with emerging economies as well outside of the OECD, and that's, I think, often they have quite low debt burdens, and they also have relatively low tax burdens, which means there's probably some fiscal space to increase resource use and perhaps use it more efficiently. But I have to say that AI is really something exciting. It's an extender. It's just sort of an extension of our budgeting capacity, our resource capacity, and I think as it moves forward in a very rapid way, to the extent that it's used well and properly with good supervision and with the trust of the population, that we may be able to leverage our resources in ways that we didn't imagine we could a few years ago.
Well, what sort of advice would you give to regional authorities who are trying to improve their financial governance?
Well, I think, work with the OECD. That's one thing. We've really tried to work with our partner governments and support them in any way we can. Learning from good practices, comparing good practices. Not every country, there's not a single model, I would say. There's good practices in many countries, and we try to synthesize recommendations across countries where things that work or combinations of policies that work well together. And, that's, I think, continual learning. And we often consider our network, I run the network on fiscal relations across levels of government, and we consider ourselves a kind of laboratory for federalism. So often subnational governments, whether they're local or regional, they often have some autonomy to experiment with new approaches, and they may be actually leading the pack. And in some financial management areas, just in terms of implementing good accounting practices, accrual-less accounting, often subnationals that are ahead. And I think that with AI, we're going to see the same thing. Often central governments tend to be, I would say, more cautious, more prudent. We've seen even outside the OECD that in fact adoption of some of these new technologies that have been applied to budgeting and financial management practices happen in other countries like Indonesia, like Brazil. And that's quite exciting. And we've seen some interesting technological developments even in places like China. And I was in India last week, and things are happening also very rapidly there.
It's very exciting stuff. Sean, thanks so much for coming to the Mediabox today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.